Hi everyone, this is Kyle with kayDbait. I wanted to do a video on bigotry today. I was going through a couple of YouTube videos and I was reading comments and I found some really bad comments. Let's see if I saw that up on my screen. Yes I do. Somebody by the name of Phantom Act on the Louis C.K. John Oliver Daily Show review interview thing has 1,000,001 hits, world buzz. I don't know if I'll link it. You can probably find it. I was just looking at the comments because I wanted to see what the comments were going to be about. And the second one from the top was made a month ago. Looking at John's nose and wondering if he's a Jew. I mean, Comedy Central already have Colbert and Stewart, who are Jewish. Wouldn't surprise me if the third host was too. And then they go on to say, no Jew has ever done anything without a hidden agenda. If he is Jewish, then we need to take what he says with a grain of salt. It's basic precaution. Let's see. They hate Muslims more. Again, they keep saying racist things. I mean, those things are more just kind of about how much they don't trust him, but then they equate everything to him being Jewish. Everything. Then they go on to say Jewish family complains, get people evicted, and sues them for losses. It's not right. But then they just keep going, saying, please type in, this is them again, please type in, and quote, shifty money-grabbing Jew into Google and select the images option. Now stop annoying me. And they're really being racist, like really racist, like unapologetically racist, unquestionably racist. One day you will work with no promotion, however your Jewish manager is giving preferential treatment to other Jews. They do say you will succeed, but only after paying your dues. What? And then somebody corrected them and says paying your dues, and then he said that's what I said. And I don't understand this level of racism. I was trying to think. See, racism is a type of bigotry, and I'm saying racism, but it's really bigotry needs to be, stopped. I mean, bigotry is that. I made a tiny little thing. Okay, I wrote in here my notes. Bigotry exists. Bigotry is bad. Bigotry needs to be ended, though without removing our freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is our ability to give our opinions and give our feelings without government laws saying you can't. Freedom of speech is a very important concept of freedom of ideas or the practice of religion. These are all things that are really important to it's just the right of being human. And it's not just a United States thing, that it exists for all humans. Are the rights of being human. So you have the freedom to live without unfair harassment, freedom to be protected. It's not really freedom. It's equality of protection. And if you're not treated equally under laws, then that is a form of oppression or judgment or bigotry. So there's a whole bunch of different levels to, it's not just the freedom to do what you want, because if you want to hurt somebody, you should not be allowed to do that. So there are levels to this. There are complexities to this. And this I know it's just one comment, like one comment string on YouTube, and YouTube is notoriously horrible in this regard, but this most simple basic act of this person hates Jewish people and simplifies and justifies just being this most racist person towards them. And I don't know what their actions would be against them if they had the power to hinder them in some way. Like would they fire them if they had power over their job? Would they attack them if they had the idea that they can get away with it? There are different levels to that. There are different kinds of insanity, and it's all ignorance. That's what it is. And then there's another note. bigotry is not a civil right. So when people say I have the freedom of speech, bigotry is an abuse of that. Bigotry is when you use a law or protection in the law to harm somebody unfairly, that's going against the nature of those laws. Laws are not meant to allow harm or allow unfairness. They are actually there to promote fairness. So if there's a fault in the law or a gray area in the law that you then take and change or abuse it, then that is a fault and it must be corrected. Now, the issue with that is it's a very gray area in a lot of ways, because first of all, it puts the burden of proof on the person that's being abused. Like, it's really common. I don't know exactly how common it is, but it does happen. Is people can get fired for certain things, and then they're fired for a different reason on paperwork, so that they cannot prove. It's like it was written. Somebody tried to do that with my dad. He was injured on the job, so they tried to fire him for something else, and he had a lot of witnesses, so he was able to prove that was the reason that they were going to fire him, and he ended up suing them and winning. But this idea that he something happened, and then they put on the paperwork that something else was the reason for what they were doing, and when that happens with a lot of racist companies or bigoted companies, saying we don't want this person working here because it either makes us uncomfortable, or it makes us, we just don't like them, or they support something that we don't support, so we're going to boot them. But we're not going to say that's the reason we're booting them. We're going to put on that they didn't do the kind of work they were supposed to do, or something else is put in, and that is a problem with our culture and with individual bigoted people with power. So when you have this idea that it's okay inside your own head, then it's really, really hard for somebody outside of your head that doesn't know that's your reasoning to prove that's your reasoning, because actions are harder to understand than if you were just to say it. Yeah, I'm firing you because you're black, or because I don't like that you're gay, or that you support gay rights, or that you're married to to somebody of a different race, or anything. You can be a bigot to anything. You can hate that they look like somebody that reminds you of their ex. There's just so many different ways that you can abuse power, and you can't easily prove. Sometimes you can. Sometimes people are just blatantly stupid, and they say something, or they gloat, or they put in the paperwork something misleading, and they get caught out on it. But when somebody does it, and it's on the person who's been abused to solve the problem, to say, hey, that wasn't fair, without sounding like they're making it about race, because it actually is, but it's not obviously about something. I keep saying race, but this is anything. It could be gender, it could be sexual orientation, it could be religious persuasion, political ideology. It could be any of these things somebody can get fired for, or just not treated fairly. So bigotry is not a civil right. It's ignorance, and to get rid of that ignorance, or to start solving this problem, education is very important. Cultural understanding is important. Different cultures are all individual, and they should be understood. Like if you say, I don't like Mexico, or I don't like the people in Afghanistan, or I don't like the people in Africa, or I don't like the people in China, but you generalize it. So any kind of generalization is bad when you're dealing with an individual in part of that generalization. Because if you don't like China, but you don't actually do anything, like say, oh, well, I don't like their culture, I don't like this or this or this or this, whatever about it, if that never really comes up in your life, like if you live in a very isolated kind of, I do this, and I'd never really do anything bad to that group, I don't interact with them, and it's not even necessarily their choice not to interact with them. I live in a very, like right now I'm in Texas, and I live in a very, it's not a hodgepodge like where I grew up in California, where there was a lot of different cultures and a lot of different kinds of people. Here there's really not as many, at least in the area that I live in now. There's really not a lot of different kinds of people that interact with me very much. Now, I'm not in a boarding house or anything, I'm in an apartment, and the only time I go out is really to work, and then when I'm at home, I read articles, and I'm on the internet, I like to watch videos, and it's, I like to online, but in person I don't interact with as many people that I could, but I also I don't get invited to places, or I'm more of a reactionary kind of person about that. If I'm invited somewhere, I'll go, but I don't really like to impose myself on other people. So I'm like, if I hear people talking about something interesting, I won't go up and start talking to them because I'm not I'm not an extrovert by any means. And I get kind of nervous, and I get anxiety when I try to do those kinds of things, and I really do. Yesterday I had guests over, but they literally just showed up at my door and they say, hey, can we hang out? And I'm like, sure, because they're friends of mine. But had they asked me if I wanted to go somewhere, or if it was a different situation, I would have been more reluctant to, because it's something that I have to get over. But other people, they're in the same boat. Maybe they don't like a certain culture, but they don't do anything against them. That's not nearly as bad as somebody who's an activist, or somebody who has power over somebody or a group or anything. Those kinds of people need to be educated. And by educated, that sounds really weird, because it sounds like it would be a forced kind of concept. But this is for the future generation. This is a cultural a slow process. As education improves, it lowers the amount of ignorance in the world. It doesn't eradicate it. I don't think ignorance really can be eradicated, because certain cultures really are very adamant about we are better than these groups, or those groups are better than this group. There are xenophobic cultures. There are cultures that cannot work together. Take North Korea's government right now. North Korea's government wants to eradicate all other governments because theirs is the only one that they feel will work. So theirs really cannot coincide in a good way. It is the enemy to free thinking. It is the enemy to just pretty much anything that is outside of their comfort zone. They're very, very xenophobic. They're very, very judgmental of criticisms, and they don't like free media. They don't like freedom of speech, or freedom of thought, or freedom of religion. So their ideas are contradictory to other ideas that are better. Freedom of speech is really, really good compared to controlling speech, which is, if they had the power, they would control the people's thoughts as well. If they had the power, they would control everything. And technically, peace would reign in the world, but it wouldn't be something that people would be happy with. It's hard to describe that, because technically they'd be happy, but they wouldn't have any freedom. They wouldn't have any choice, and it would be unfairly balanced towards the people that are already in power. People that are born without power will never get it. There's no building up of anything. There is the leadership and the peasants, and that's not equal. That's not fair. So what I'm saying is that, respecting other cultures, understanding other cultures, yes, there is a complexity though. There is this idea that you should learn and you should understand, and then yes, diversity is good. Diversity allows for progression, learning. This culture focuses on this, that culture focuses on this, and then they build up and they build up and they talk to each other and they learn from each other, and then the good things from this culture can be integrated into this culture, or this culture is really, really good at this, and their cultures are how people learn. There are good cultures that focus on different things, and there are spiritual, there are technological, there's just a whole bunch of really cool things around the world, and we're not the best, they're not the best, they're not the best. We all have our own good qualities, and cultures should be able to look at each other and see those qualities. And yes, you can look at the bad qualities as well, like, oh, this culture is kind of xenophobic, or this culture doesn't really treat the elderly well, or this culture has a really weird thing on childbirth or anything. There are different ways of seeing the good and the bad, and understanding them is important because after a while, the world is getting smaller with the advent of technology, all of these cool things about communication, and it's easier to travel and it's easier to visit all these different places and actually see them, and money helps for traveling or whatever, but you can still talk to people in other places. I love talking to people around the world. Generally, talking to people within the United States, it's fun, it's enjoyable, but I actually enjoy talking to people from around the world more. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I feel that a lot of people just repeat what's in the media in the United States more often. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but I do see it a lot in my Facebook feed, and when I'm trying to talk to people like where I work, there's a lot of they want to talk about sports, they want to talk about who's dating who in the Kardashians. And it's not something I want to talk about as much. So I'm not saying that it's the end all for communication, but it's more common in other cultures for people to talk about, or at least be open. Maybe it's just the concept of the internet, where they're more inclined, the people that I talk to anyway, to be reading articles around the world as opposed to just what's in their little area. Because I was talking to one person who lives in Venezuela, and I was asking him about the overthrow of the government just not that long ago, or the attempted overthrow of the government, and the fact that their money it was inflating vastly, and then it stopped inflating when the oil companies came in and they started building a lot of infrastructure there. But then the government there is solely relying on those industries, and I was worried about the value of his money, his savings accounts, and just his ability to function in a country that is so quickly changing. And he didn't know about it as much as I thought he would. So I was looking up all these different things, and he had a lot of information about the history of Venezuela, but he wasn't really into any of the current stuff. And I was really I was curious, and I wanted to learn more, and he didn't really have as much to say. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but I was really like, I want to learn about this, and I was trying to talk to him about it, and he was just like, eh. So that's another thing. Not everyone wants to talk about politics, not everyone wants to talk about stuff like that, but it's nice to try to have those conversations, especially around the world. And so I think that idea would be a really big thing to stop bigotry, because learning about different countries and learning about different cultures, learning about their histories and their current situations is really good for broadening your mind. And bigotry is a really narrow-minded thing. It's a really specific, this is the way it is regardless of how it actually is. And even if it is this way in certain spots, it's not everywhere. So when you generalize that over there with something that's over here and it's not accurate, or even if it technically is accurate, it's still not really fair because you don't know it's accurate, you're just guessing at that point. All of these things are so important, and people don't talk about it as much as they should. I mean, it's around. I'm not saying it's not around, especially the media. They like to talk about the things that are happening like right now, and a lot of those things are they're individual events. They might be a symptom of a much larger thing, but they never talk about the larger thing. They always talk about the little thing, the thing that's happening right now, and then they generalize and they simplify the situation to fit their narrative. And I don't know why. The media should not have a narrative. The media should not have a bias. The media should not have an agenda beyond telling us what's happening. When this was bothering me a few days ago. This was really bothering me. I was watching an interview with a newscaster, and they were using words that politicians use. And this is an old interview. It was Jon Stewart and what's that guy's name? He's the guy on Fox News that people say is one of the actual better newscasters, and he is. I've watched a lot of his stuff, and he is generally more fair than the other people, in that the other people don't really talk about anything fair. But he was what's his name? Starts with a C. I can't remember his name. I don't want to Google it because that takes too long to edit this. But when you have a politician and they say words like filibuster or stonewalling or just accusing other people of having a political agenda. A newscaster, or a journalist, or an interviewer can use those words, but when they use those words in the exact same way, saying, when he asked Jon Stewart a question. I can't remember his name. He asked Jon Stewart a question. Jon Stewart was trying to answer the question, and then the guy immediately jumped into another question before he was done answering. And Jon Stewart pretty much said, "Wait, I want to answer that question. I am not done answering that question." And when he kept trying to ask the question anyway, Jon just said, "You know what? Stop. Let me answer this question. I am going to answer this question." The guy says, "What do you know? You're filibustering. You're and a filibuster is when a politician will not leave I believe it's the Senate. It's either the Senate or Congress, the floor. They will not stop speaking, and they are not allowed to be stopped until they stop speaking. As long as they're continuously speaking, they cannot be stopped by anyone else. So it's a way of blocking progression, pretty much. And generally, they'll either talk about the actual issue at hand, or they will just try to block everything until a time limit's over, and then something goes through because they can't stop it. Just whatever. There's when an interviewer says that when somebody's trying to answer a question they were asked, when they're just trying to answer the question fully, and you say you filibuster. A filibuster is when you're trying to stop something. You're trying to block something. You're trying to take more time than is needed to actually do something. It's the opposite of answering a question. It's spewing so much data that it's messing things up. When somebody's asked a question by a legitimate, unbiased source, that source should want the answer, the complete answer. And if you have a time limit, if you say, well, we don't have enough time to answer this question, don't ask that question. If you ask a question that cannot be answered in a certain amount of time, and maybe you didn't know it was going to be that long, maybe you don't know that it's going to take a longer amount of time to answer than you thought, okay, that's cool. But you have to explain that. You cannot accuse the answerer of taking too long, the person answering the question. You're not even accusing them of taking too long, you're accusing them of having an agenda of why they're taking too long. That is not fair, especially for a journalist or anybody that is asking these questions. And it shows their bias. It shows their, not every time, I'm not saying every time, but in this case, they asked the question, they either didn't like the answer, or they felt that the answer, if it was explained fully, wouldn't have fit their narrative because it was no longer a sound bit. Then it's really easy to say, okay, this or this. And you're like, well, I'm not comfortable with either of those, but I'll say this one. Okay, next question. No, I want to explain my answer. No, we don't have time. That is a sound bit kind of situation where they give you a question. Maybe it sounds harmless, maybe you don't understand the question fully, or maybe they just don't give you enough time to answer it fully, but you are not given a fair opportunity to answer it clearly. Complex situations, complex questions, even a simple question with a complex answer, you need time either to think of what the question means or think about how to answer the question. You're not given the time. The media doesn't give you the time because either their viewers don't have the attention span anymore, or the news media doesn't have enough time to air it all, maybe. Though it's 24-hour news now, so they should have enough time. Just cut back on the stuff that's not actually as important. Like, hey, this is a bill. This is a really big, important law that's being passed. What's this guy's take on it? Okay, too much time on that one. What's this guy's take? Too much time on it. What's this guy's take on it? That happens. It happens a lot, and it's not necessarily bad as long as they're not pushing their narrative. If you're pushing your narrative over what is actually true or over what is fair, because there are good things and bad things, and you can be supporting of this and you can be against that, but that's okay in general. But the media is not supposed to choose what's good and bad. They're supposed to be fair and honest, and that's not the case in a lot of times because they have this agenda of what they want to be true. And that, I know I was supposed to be talking about bigotry and stuff like that. This is a form of unfairness. This is a form of, it's I don't know if there's a term for it. It's like journalistic prejudice. It's just this idea that their narrative is more important than truth, and and this is how it ties back in. It is misinforming the public, and it is spreading ignorance. And ignorance is the main cause of prejudice. It's when you don't understand something, you either fear it because people told you to, or you don't understand it and people just naturally fear what they don't understand, or maybe they do understand things but not as well as they could, and like, you know, the military, the world should fear the United States military because it's one of the biggest it is the biggest military in the world, financially, technologically, and we have a willingness to use it in ways that other countries have never used theirs before. We're the only country to nuke another country. So we have a history of stuff like that, not necessarily that we'll do it again, but we have all of these things, and people don't know. I mean, if there was another country, and there are a lot of them, that have this idea that they are right at all times, and that's what's spread throughout the media and through the populations of the country, then of course they're going to fear and hate and not understand and attack the United States. And if you spread facts, maybe some people will ignore it or think it's not true, and that's common as well. You have to give the effort. You have to give as much as you can to be fair and informative and clear, and just make as many people understand truth as possible. And that is the way to fight ignorance and to stop bigotry, like on this stupid comments about Jewish people, against Jewish people. I hate this, and this is why, because they're Jewish. And it's like, no, that is the most ignorant kind of people. If you don't like Jewish people because you've met a Jewish person and you didn't like them, or you've seen Jewish people do horrible things, okay, you can explain that. But then if somebody tries to explain, hey, well, there's also good ones, and you say no, then now you're generalizing, you're grabbing that group and you're just shoving it to everything. You're stapling it to the everything box, and you're putting everything in there. And that's not fair, because you are simplifying, and you are ignorant of the truth. You are seeing case studies of your own perception, and you are generalizing it to the entire populace that fits that idea in your mind. That would be people who are Jewish, or maybe people who sympathize with the Jewish culture, maybe with Nazis. I don't know. I'm not saying that to name drop Nazis, but when you get to the point where you are saying all Jews are X, then there is a very easy step towards that, because there are neo-Nazis in the United States that exist, and that is something that needs to be dealt with. I'm not talking about militarily, I'm talking about culturally. As the culture improves, as you increase education, those kinds of hate groups will become weakened, because their amount of hate speech isn't as effective, because people can just say, wait, that's not actually true. Their brains are the same size as ours. Their culture may be different, but that doesn't necessarily mean bad, because the things you're saying aren't true. So you can question them, and you can comment on them, and you can say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to this kind of talk, because it is not true, and you can still listen to it for the sake of understanding their argument, but that doesn't mean you will agree with it, and that's what I mean by not listening, just not agreeing with it, or not following the orders that are given. So that's my take on bigotry. I don't know, I kind of went off on saying something else, but it all tied back in. The media is not presenting as well as it should be. Education is very important, and the media is part of education. It is a very large part of our daily form of personal education, where we're trying to learn things about the world, and the media is not giving us as much as it should. So school, home education, media education, what the politicians are doing and what they're saying, and the gross amount of simplification around the United States and probably around the world, all of it needs to be addressed, and it's not simple. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast. There is no simple solution. There is this idea that if you simplify something and then you give a simplified answer, that it's going to fix everything, and it doesn't. If you're lucky, it won't make it worse. Generally, it does. Then the next generation is raised on this idea that simplified problems exist. So then they give even more simplified answers, and you have people that do a 5% tax cut to this, when it's a socioeconomic, cultural, racist, just all of these a million factors that need to be addressed, and you're saying, well, you know what, tax this thing and cut that thing and it'll fix everything. That's not how it works. There has to be programs, there has to be understanding of the problems, there has to be people that actually spend time on it. Maybe there's not enough time, maybe the government needs to get together more often and actually talk about the things instead of yelling at each other. They don't talk to each other as much as they should. They don't, instead of yelling at each other a lot, but how often do they all get together and they just talk? How often does that happen? Sometimes they do. Most of the time they already have an idea of what they're trying to do and they're just arguing for that. They're not arguing to understand the other side, they're arguing to beat the other side. So you have to get all of this stuff together, you have to talk about it, you have to learn about it, you have to grow up with the ability to, because you have to learn this stuff. You can't, you can inherently kind of have a moral compass or whatever, but you have to still refine it, you have to understand things that you're talking about. And you can't just simplify an answer, or simplify the question, or simplify anything. You have to know. These people rule the country. These people control the military. These people make the decisions that change people's lives on a massive scale. On a massive amount of people on a massive scale. You have to be able to understand. And this is ignorance. Ignorance is the problem. Bias is one of the symptoms of ignorance, and other things as well, but that's something else. But if we can fix the education system, if we can fix the media bias, if we can fix the ineptitude and the corruption and the laziness of the government's leadership, that would help. And I'm not saying to everybody, I'm not saying every single person involved is the problem, but it needs to be addressed and it needs to be treated as a complex problem. Every single kind of simplification is another step towards the wrong way, because it's something that doesn't address the problems that exist. They're the ones that either we fabricate or that we misunderstand and then misreact to. So that's my argument, and I hope you guys learned something, or I hope you guys can comment below about what you think. That's it. Take care, and